Hi, and thanks for joining us for Praemium's podcast series. I'm Matt van Dijk, General Manager for Queensland and the Northern Territory.
And today I'm joined by Peter Warne. He's the Managing Director of Finura Group, a leading technology and consulting firm. Finura advises some of Australia and the UK's leading financial services companies on their strategy and execution. Peter, thanks for joining us. Great to have you here today.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
And Peter and I were having a brief chat before we started today's podcast. There's some really interesting things that are taking space around technology and how businesses are considering technology. And really the first question, Peter, I wanted to sort of run past you and riff on a little bit today was around satisfaction, because we've really seen that satisfaction is consistently being reported both anecdotally and in many polls as a problem for many, many people. And ever since PCs really became a feature in modern offices a generation ago, we've seen people saying, look, we're not happy with this, we're not happy with that. You've really worked with a lot of advice groups and you've been consulting on their technology health. What do you seem to find as being the root cause of this?
Yeah, the data certainly suggests you're right. Satisfaction's never been lower with financial advice software. According to the latest investment trend survey, it's at an all-time low, 58% or lower, which is diabolical. Platforms much higher though, Matt. You'd be pleased to see. Everyone seems to like their platform, just not their software. And maybe some of the answers to that are in that question. I think there's two aspects. I think the industry, the software industry for financial advisors is fairly small in Australia. So there hasn't been the same flood of capital into our sector for R&D and to make products better, because the addressable market is just not that big, pretty capital constrained, and also in a lot of cases advisors don't want to spend a lot of money on software. So perhaps it's a chicken and the egg problem. Platforms, totally different story, because there's a lot of really successful companies like Praemium and others that have built great businesses on the back of that. So
I was going to say, it's a really interesting point though, because platforms aren't paid for by the advice firm usually either, unless it's a software as a service product, which we do have, but it's the end investor which is arguably paid for the platform through their administration fees, not the advice business. Right. And for the numbers nerds on the podcast like me, we're talking at circa 15,600, I think, advisors now as of end of August 2023. If you're going to put the capital towards developing software, if that's the size of your addressable market, that's got to put a price on software, or how much you're going to be investing. That can generate some very scary numbers really, really quickly when you're looking at what your ROI or your return on investment's got to be for the amount of capital that you're going to be putting in to not only create but then service that sort of tech debt.
Yeah, spot on. And if you look at other more successful software companies in the B2B space, Xero is the one I go to quite a lot. They made their software actually free for accountants, and they charged the small business user. And that's and that was a genius strategy, because accountants are like financial advisors; they want to spend a lot of money, and no one's quite cracked that in wealth management. And maybe this is why, in actual fact, platforms are playing an increasing role in technology for that reason. So that's sort of the economics. But I think back to the behavioural side and why people are less satisfied with software. I do like this idea of liquid expectations, and it basically means that our senses of satisfaction are often governed by our most recent experiences of something in parallel. So if I'm using Netflix, or I'm using my iPhone, or some of these amazing apps that we and particularly my children take completely for granted today, that just work out of the box and are really intuitive, we kind of start to expect that in our daily life with the other software solutions we use. So if you go from that and then you go into use one of the more traditional financial planning solutions, you sort of go, gee, the UI looks a bit old, looks a bit tired.
There's a lot of friction here.
Clunky, all those things, and go, gee, why not better? So I think that's driving it. I think it's the amount of effort that has to go on customization and configuration of software is really misunderstood. So I could talk to two users of the same software solution and get two really different stories on their satisfaction levels. And what I tend to find is the user that's actually spent a lot of time on configuration, customization, and training of the software solution is always happier. It's just by and large. And we have this view or this idea that, oh, it should just work out of the box. Well, software built for consumers works out of the box. That's how it's got to work by design. Software for businesses has never worked that way. So in every other vertical, every other industry out there, the customer, the business, needs to spend time configuring the solution to work for them. Because as businesses, we do things really differently. And financial planning in particular, we have literally found millions of ways of doing this processes across business to business. This is the platform, right? This is a challenge for platforms to think. So I think part of it's the software not maybe reinvesting enough in the UI and the experience. I think part of it's the user as well. And we just haven't got that. Now, what I would say is that's changing a lot as businesses are more corporatizing. They're understanding they've got to spend money on software. But don't get me wrong, we come across just as many unhappy Salesforce users, which is widely regarded as the best CRM in the world, really unhappy Salesforce users, as we do, small little CRMs that are, very, very limited functionality. So it's just like everything in life. It's what you put into it that you get out of it. And I think that's driving a lot of satisfaction issues. Yeah.
So is it really, I guess, a combination of the inherent complexity that comes in having an engine room grade level of technology and need to be able to manipulate different things, as well as what we're getting very much used to in terms of how we run these large consumer scale apps, and just kind of that disconnect going, why can't something run as well as what I'm running on my phone that my kids use, whereas I've got to use something that's just, it's not sexy, it's not cool, it seems to add friction, not remove it.
Yeah, and I think the economics are quite obvious in the sense that Facebook or Meta, who owns Instagram, it's a $400 billion market cap company. Iris, that runs most of the software for Australia, is now a $1.2 billion company as of this week. So just the sheer amount of capital they have to spend on UI and the cloud computing and the infrastructure, and anyone that's in software knows how much infrastructure costs now for cloud computing. It's so expensive to do anything. Just knows that there's some issues there. So compromises have to be made. And don't forget, if these software companies don't make a profit, they won't provide these software solutions for our market. So I think this is why I do say to advice to abstract yourself in for more expensive software, because that's the only way things are going to get better.
I remember when Apple hit a sort of 700 bill market cap a number of years ago, and which was exchange rates, it was about $1 trillion at the time. You could literally buy the top 20 companies if you were to liquidate Apple down to dollar coins in the ASX. So that was all you mined as a Clocklear, banks, telcos.
Yeah.
Everyone coming through there, top 20 businesses at the big end of town. And it's just the scale is kind of a bit missed there.
Yeah.
Talking about businesses, though, like Meta particularly, so who run Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook, that I can think of. I can't remember they bought Snap or if that was someone else. There was a saying that came out with those businesses where a lot of people perceive them to be free. And I'm reminded of that comment that there's no such thing as a free lunch. And if you're not paying for a product, it means you are the product.
Yeah.
What I was then reflecting on again was the rise of generative AI tools, your ChatGPTs, to go with something that's, so hot right now. I think there are, and I'm keen to get your thoughts for the audience on this, there are some real challenges around how much information is being fed, privacy of information, how that's being used. And then how privacy leads into cybersecurity, how as a business you might be making rules around what's used and what's not, but how are you ensuring that's being followed by your staff, and particularly for staff that might see it as almost becoming an ubiquitous part of their life?
Yeah, totally. And we're literally learning daily as to what this all means. So you're right, the free component of ChatGPT, and there is a paid version, which is just faster and, different things, but the free version, the reason it's free is everyone that uses it is actually training the product to make it better. Okay. But of course that will change in time, because the sheer costs of running ChatGPT, the cost per search are enormous because the computing power that's got to go behind it. Look at the NVIDIA share price. It'll tell you everything you need to know about why, GPUs, particularly to run these models, are so valuable. So if we go back a step, why does it really matter? Well, obviously, if you're just at home trying to work out, writing, how do I write a funny Christmas card to my mother-in-law, that's fine for ChatGPT. They'll do, and they'll do lots of cool stuff. But the minute you start creeping your work life, and particularly you're dealing with consumers, you got to be more mindful. So we're quite big on, and as always, you can't sit around and wait for regulation. I mean, crypto was only regulated a few months ago as a financial product. I mean, hell, yet literally trillions have been lost, and we're only regulating that. Anyway, don't get me started on that. But let's look at AI. So the short answer is, the regulations are never going to tell you what to do because they'll never be fast enough. So you got to get on the front foot with your stuff. So what, by and large, certainly Finura, we don't believe in draconian ban it. Like I've seen a lot of big companies ban it. It's naive. People are going to use it on their phone. People have always found ways to get around this stuff. The same thing happened with social media, right? Back in the day, you couldn't use social media at work, and that just never works. Mobile's killed that. But I think from a work environment point of view, there are steps you can take as an enterprise to lock that down. So, for example, Microsoft Bing is a search capability built into its model. There is a Bing Enterprise version of ChatGPT, which, for example, Finura uses. So all of us use that version. It's a locked-in environment where effectively we use that large language model, but we only use it on our large data and nothing goes outside of it. So that's a simple thing most businesses can turn on just to mitigate some of that risk. Now, you're never going to fully mitigate the risk that, Billy in paraplanning is going to put something in his phone around. Look, unfortunately, humans are going to do human things, but that is a reasonable thing I think a business can do to mitigate some of that. And I'd encourage you to speak to your managed service IT provider to turn on that capability. They know exactly what you're talking about.
Brilliant. I think there's, we're starting to sort of move into some areas around what is the need of an advice practice manager or owner to understand how technology is being used in the business. And this sort of plays out in a number of interesting ways, because we were, look, for those of you that love to go and do it, Peter and I have just done a webinar where we've touched on a lot of these concepts. You can find on the Praemium website. But one of the concepts that sort of came up was around what proper due diligence looks like and how that stopped people from activating their ideal outcome when they're taking on a new form of software. And I was thinking at the time when we were going through it, Peter, that I feel that a lot of advisors and advice business owners and managers don't actually know what proper DD fundamentally looks like. I actually remember presenting to a large group of advisors once, and the concept of cybersecurity came in my presentation. And an advisor said to me at the time, look, I don't have time to think about cybersecurity. That's my licensee's problem. So I remember side-eyeing the owner of the license, who was sitting a couple of desks away, and the expression on his face told 1,000 words at that particular time. And so, look, that's certainly an extreme example where someone's completely, abdicating any responsibility for things blowing up digitally. But if people are thinking about, okay, I get that proper due diligence is important, where do I start? How do I start? What does my IT committee look like? Do I need an IT committee? Can you offer some suggestions to the audience around how they might want to consider solving that question around what does proper DD really look like and how to start?
Look, I think I said in the webinar, like I can't stand committees generally, but I'm going to recommend at least a working group of the willing, I'd call it. So what I would say, if you've got people in your business that really enjoy this stuff, then it makes sense to utilise their talents and get them invested in it and create it. And we certainly for Finura, we work. So quite often we'll sit as an advisor to the business, bringing that outside perspective. I'll consult to boards, I'll do different things, or we'll run that process. But we would always insist on an internal person kind of being involved. But I think having some sort of forum where IT issues or software issues can be brought to the table is important. And importantly, where if the business is big enough, particularly where there's sort of representatives of different stakeholders of the business, where you can get people's requirements and feedback and all those kind of things in place, so actually you can make some better decisions moving forward. I find it quite incredible that so many software decisions are made by advisors and practice owners, and it's the poor support staff that inherit those decisions and are not part of the process. I'm quite critical of software companies that don't spend any time with the back office staff in the sales process, who frankly are the user and the most critical eye on these things. You want to know good software, good software is, go talk to paraplanners. They'll tell you exactly what's good and what's not. So I just think it's that human element of the decision-making process needs to be better, in the same way that some advisors are great advisors, but they're not good at pick and manage funds. you get an asset consultant for that, or it's the same thing for me. So I just think that's logical what you can do. We have, and your licensee or people like Finura do have some resources you can use to give software vendors some due diligence questions to ask. Often we'll make those questions more around how many users they got, satisfaction levels, support levels, just that kind of stuff. Their economic viability is an important question to ask, just to go eyes wide open, and recommendations and endorsements from people who are frankly not shareholders of the business or advisors that are invested in and think it's a good idea. So, you just say that about any product, right? At the end of the day, they for me are the right things. But I think even then, upper level a bit is ask yourself that fundamental question: why are we doing this again? What is this really going to address in our business? And is it going to solve the issue we think it will? And so often we just find the wrong thing put in for the wrong reasons and combination of those factors. So Matt, there's not a single issue there, but I think it's a combination of standard tickets to the game due diligence on the provider, but more importantly, just spending time as the business saying, what are we really trying to solve here, and why?
And I think as well, the other key point is going, maybe it's not, depending on the size of the business, and I understand that there's going to be resource limitations for every business, no matter the size. But going, hey, maybe it's not me that needs to solve this. Maybe I've got staff that can do it. Maybe I can partner with someone to do it. Think outside, so it's not going to be a problem because it. And I think sort of really my last question on today's conversation, but before I move on to something that's hopefully a little bit more aspirational, longer term, looking to a brighter future. When I'm thinking about risk and governance, we know cybersecurity is that key priority, but it's a bit like, when you're thinking about investment, it's like risk and liquidity. By the time it's a problem, it's far too late to really do anything about it. So we'd be keen to get your thoughts, Peter, on what Finura's observed as what those key areas are that really need addressing in the cybersecurity space. So if anyone's going to be kind of going, checklist, do I think I'm on the right track?
Yep.
What does that really look like?
So three key things. First one is training of staff. So I'm on 3 or 4 different boards. I've got to do cybersecurity training for all of them, which is quite frustrating because they're all different courses. But that's part of our governance model. Every employee, top to bottom, director, whoever you are, does cyber training, learning what to do and not to do. They do. The companies I'm involved with, we do phishing tests. We do all sorts of tests to see, are our employees clicking on things they shouldn't be clicking? I think you've got to do that. That's probably the first thing, because most cyber incidents are generally caused by a human making a mistake, okay? And usually an employee. The second part of the equation is probably more operational, and that is, how do we share data with our clients, with our external partners, with our stakeholders? There was a really smart question in the webinar going, why is an email secure? And the simple reason, it's not about your email security, it's about your counterparty. Often you can't control what happens to something on the other side, but ultimately it's your data. You're on the hook if things go wrong. That's why you want to create secure environments that people can access information. So we're big fans of people using document sharing portals to share sensitive stuff, so you got to handle all that. So that's sort of a process thing. And the third one is definitely around password management protocols. We're still, the amount of businesses that are still trying to save money, save a few bucks here and there on licenses by sharing passwords. We know people do it. We know there's WhatsApp groups going around and people sharing Xplan logins and all sorts of stuff. It's got to stop. Part of being a profession is paying for the tools that we use to do our jobs, right? And happy to take the stand in the industry that I think multi-factor authentication should be mandated in all software financial advisors use. Advisors are lucky Iris haven't done this yet. I reckon they will in time, because I just think it's just such an obvious way something's going to go wrong from my perspective. So, so I think to summarise that, it would be definitely the training, processes and document management and password management. They're the 3 really small, low-hanging fruit things you can do. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Thanks for that. I think to sort of move on to some positive changes that people, or everything we've talked about arguably are positive changes, but a lot of advice firms that I'm speaking to are often sort of asking the question around what's the right number of technology platforms to use, and where do they really start in creating a framework to evaluate that? So if business is going, right, how do I right size my business from a technology perspective? How can I begin thinking about that?
Yeah, and there's variables into that equation. So it will come down to the type of business you run. Are you a pure financial planning, wealth management business? Are you wholesale? Are you retail? Are you multidisciplinary? Do you have accounting, lending, other services? So there's a whole bit of nuance there around those things, which will go into that. And certainly one would argue that as the complexion of the business changes, it may change the software, it may change the CRM you use, and those things will play a factor. I think, though, we look at what are the core pillars, and the core pillars really for us are what is that central source of data, central source of truth that we use across our business to make decisions, to execute on client engagement, and that's a CRM component. There's the productivity side of our business. How do we communicate internally? How do we share documents? How do we collaborate? And for most businesses, it's Microsoft or Google, and 95% of them, the Microsoft suites. And are we maximizing what we get for free or included in our Microsoft price out of that? Amazed how many businesses don't use the full power of that Microsoft suite. And then the final component is probably the more that client front end piece, which I think is the most underinvested and undervalued part of it, is the sense that, post COVID, people really, I think people sometimes really underestimate their clients, how digitally savvy they are. I mean, a year and a half ago, you couldn't go to a restaurant in Melbourne without knowing how to use an app and a QR code. You couldn't order food without a QR code in a restaurant, and in some cases still today. It didn't matter how old you were, that you use this stuff. And I think, I think retirees are more digitally savvy than ever before, and I think will quite willingly embrace a more digital relationship with their advisor. They still want the personal relationship. Don't get me wrong, that never goes away. But there's so many things you can be doing via portals and things like that for the future. And I think that's really where the game should be played in the future, is all the back office stuff that clients don't know whether you use Xplan or what CRM is. They don't care, nor should they. But they do care about how you share data with them, how you engage them, how you book appointments with them, how the video chat works. They're the things I'd be spending my time on. And I reckon they're the really exciting things that are, frankly, the bar's pretty low. It's pretty easy to differentiate yourself on that stuff.
We've seen a really interesting sort of, this play out in quite an interesting way, where you're right. It's the experience that someone's getting in a lot of other facets of their life, whether it's booking a table at a restaurant, booking their car in for a service. Almost every other business that they're engaging with
GP,
has some form of digital mechanism to go, I need an appointment, hairdresser, barber, doctor, dentist. It's almost all done online and not handled by a receptionist, or almost in rare cases. And so you've got to say, well, why would we be any different? What we're also seeing is that there's this interesting way that's playing out with firms where they might have a slightly older demographic of client, and they're starting to consider about, okay, so it's not so much about managing wealth. We're now thinking about transferring wealth to the next generation. And so it's feeding into that intergenerational wealth transfer concept. And of course, what we're seeing is the next generation of client that's going to be either inheriting or managing the wealth from the benefactor, the beneficiaries. If they're not seeing that modern interface, or if they're not seeing an advice business that appears to be keeping up with how technology should be used in a professional manner, they're thinking maybe this isn't the right firm for us anymore. Let's find someone that's actually going to suit our generation or our needs. And so I think there's a really interesting consideration there for any business that's thinking about if I'm going to be in business 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, what have I got to be doing today to make sure I'm not going to be making some very painful, expensive mistakes along the way before we come out. Peter, last question for you today is really an open question for you to, I guess, flag to the audience that if there was one thing that you'd ask people to either think about, consider, or be encouraged and excited about in the tech space relative to our profession, what might that look like? What are really you excited about, or what are some of the trends, changes? What's coming up around the corner that you think is going to really make technology and advice businesses really sing together quite beautifully?
It's going to be such a cliche, but I am really going to say the co-pilot capability that Microsoft is about to give us all.
Oh yeah, cool. Yep.
Is just going to touch every role in a business. There's very, very few times in life where something comes along that really touches everyone's jobs. So, when email first happened in someone's career, now that was in my career, email was kind of happened. It was established, but when email happened, or when mobile kind of first happened, I remember mobile. I remember my first BlackBerry. There was just the time. It just changed the way we worked, and I really genuinely feel we're in this moment now. And I would encourage businesses that can afford to do it, large business, get a few interns in the next couple of years to work over your summer break. Kids from uni, they might not want to be advisors, but that's okay. They just want some experience, who are growing up in this AI world, and they're going to think really differently about jobs and tasks and how you do things. Get them in your business and go, hey, how would you use these co-pilots? What should we be doing differently? What can we learn from them? I love the saying, I follow he's as a NYU professor, Scott Galloway, that puts a lot of content out, and he says that AI won't replace people, but people that use AI will. I just hang on to that, and I just think, so it's not going to be an X-plan replacement. It's not going to be this or that. Like, don't get those things will be what they'll be, but I just think it's a ubiquitous change which is happening to everyone, and I just think embrace it, move mindfully through it, and think about it in the way of how can it just make us so much better at what we do, and so that for me is the big winner for the next 3
So
to 5
big
years.
disruptor. It's a case of don't be like that person hanging onto a taxi license when Uber's coming out, thinking that this is going to be the way forward.
Yeah, and look, frankly, for a lot of businesses we talk to, email's dead. They just use Teams and Slack and these things. Even in Finura, the only emails I ever send are to our clients, and if they have a Slack channel, I'd rather use that with them. So there are moments, and you know what? That's a bloody good thing, because email is terrible. We hate it. So I genuinely feel the roles we have in our business, the people and the capability we have in our business is really going to change. And the really exciting thing for business owners and advisors, it'll hopefully expand the number of clients you can serve at a much more reasonable cost. You have less people doing horrible jobs, matching data on spreadsheets and data matching commissions reports. People don't go to uni for 4 years to do that work. They go to uni to be creative and talk to people and build things. And I think, there's this wonderful change that's going to come through the white collar roles. And the awesome thing about the advice industry is we've got a whole bunch of IFAs, small business run by entrepreneurs that can kind of embrace this stuff really quickly. So I reckon be one of those firms.
Brilliant. That's great. Well, Peter, thanks for joining us for our Advice Leaders podcast today. It has been excellent getting to work with you once again. Certainly to the audience, I'd encourage you to reach out to Peter and to Finura if you think that they can be of help to you and your business, and wish you all the best luck and success for the future moving forward. Thanks again, Peter.